Well, good morning, everyone. Welcome to Lawrence Park Community Church, and I'm saying that to people who are actually in Lawrence Park Community Church. This is so cool. Yay. This is the first time we've had congregants since mid-December, I think. And of course, we didn't have congregants for all that long before that. It was only for a couple of months, right? It's so nice to have you back. And of course, it's wonderful to have everyone at home, and I hope that many of you will be enticed to come back in person. But we'll be doing this as a hybrid service, perhaps forever. We have no intention of stopping this, so if people go away on vacation, or you end up living in a nursing home, or for any other reason you can't or don't want to come to service, our services will always be available online. But it's still great to have people in the house, so thank you for coming in. So today's service happens at a time of transitions. It's Transfiguration Sunday, which means that we're going to be hearing a scripture reading about when Jesus appeared in front of Moses and Elijah as the fulfillment of the promise that those prophets had been given the message to speak for all those centuries, that a Messiah was coming, and there was Jesus among them, and he glowed in white. The way the Bible says that his holiness was revealed to them and to the disciples standing there. So it's a day where we're going to be talking about you see something one way, and then suddenly you see it another way. And this is also the last Sunday in Black History Month. And to honor that, we have invited former Mayor John Sewell to speak today. So I won't be giving the sermon. Mr. Sewell will be giving the sermon. Mr. Sewell has recently written a book about policing in Canada, where he compares how Toronto's police conduct themselves relative to other police forces in Canada and North America. So he'll be talking about how the Toronto police are active in our community, and of course that has been a concern for people who are Black and other people of color, and those who also have mental health issues, because the police have drawn quite a bit of criticism for how they deal with mental health crises. So he'll be talking about those various issues. So we'll be invited to look at the police from a different angle than usual, and it promises to be really interesting. I would also like to acknowledge the beautiful flower arrangement behind me. As you can see, it spreads all the way across the stone table, and this is the Thompson Grand Memorial, and it's our annual spring garden arrangement. And this has been a tradition, Rob Thompson tells us, since 1953, possibly earlier. It started off as something which was done to memorialize the death of a congregant who actually died while square dancing, one of the Thompsons, and has been going on ever since as a marker that, yes, spring actually will come. So it's lovely to have the flowers on the table telling us that, yes, despite all the snow and the cold, spring is indeed coming. So we thank the families for that. Today's Sunday school is still online. We'll be talking to the parents about when we should transition to put it back into the church. But if you need the Zoom code for the Sunday school, which happens at 11 o'clock on a separate Zoom call, just type into the chat that you would like to be on to that, and Allison will give you the Zoom code. We also have closed captioning for those at home as well as those who are here. There's closed captioning on our screen, so you can follow along. And now, may I invite ourselves during this time of tumult, worldwide as well as here in the city, to just take 2 deep breaths as we enter into worship. 1. Let it out. And another one. And let it out. And now our soloists are going to sing, "We Have Come at Christ's Own Bidding." And sorry, can I have sound one more second? For those of you in the house, you can hum, but please don't sing. Thank you. Friends, we are living in a time where peace seems to be a rare commodity in some parts of the world. We fear that peace will lose its grip on our entire world as people start to find violent ways of solving problems, to deal with ancient grudges, and to make up new ones. So let's remember on this Sunday that when Jesus appeared to his disciples for the first time after he had been killed by an empire that had no interest in peace, that invaded country after country and took people hostage and made them into slaves, his first words were not, let's go get the spears and the arrows, let's go get the weapons, but rather, peace be with you. Because it's only peace that is the antidote to the violent, angry emotions which motivate war. So let us, in our way today, here and online, nurture that, kindle that small little flame of peace and make it burn more brightly in our hearts so that we can push back against its terrible alternative. Peace be with you. Please unmute yourselves at home and share the peace of Christ, and we're going to actually touch each other here in the sanctuary. So, kids and kid, we actually have a child in the house today. That's great. Charlotte's here. So, I have some pancakes in my hand here, and you might wonder why. I would pass them around, but then you'd have to take your masks off, and we can't do that. Heavy sigh. And that's actually the reason why I wanted to talk about pancakes today, because if this was a normal year, say a couple of years ago, this would be Pancake Sunday, and we'd be eating pancakes right after the service. But we can't because of COVID things, and it's not safe to really take our masks off in a group this big. So, well, you might wonder, okay, but why pancakes now? I mean, pancakes are always a good idea, so why now? Well, it's because this is actually the last Sunday before Lent starts. On Tuesday, there's going to be, Tuesday is going to be one last big celebration, and then Wednesday is the actual start of Lent. And so what's Lent? Lent is a word that actually means to lengthen, because the days are getting longer now, which is nice. But Lent is a period of about 40 days, plus some Sundays, between now and Good Friday. And on Good Friday, that's the day that we remember that Jesus was killed on a cross, and then Easter Sunday happens a couple days later. During Lent, we are encouraged to prepare ourselves for what happened to Jesus, and we do that by remembering that Jesus started his ministry after he was baptized, by spending time in the desert. And he was in the desert for 40 days and 40 nights. And during that time, he didn't eat anything. So a lot of people during Lent decide to fast on some days, and other people give up other things like chocolate or dessert. Some people decide to do something new, which they don't usually do, like something for someone else. They start volunteering, or they do something which is good for the world. The point of it is to be able to do something every day that reminds you of your relationship to God and to Jesus, so that you can sort of take some time to take care of your inner spiritual journey, which is something which often gets lost when we're really busy with life. So Lent is a way of just sort of slowing us down. And it's funny because in French, the word lent means slow. So if you know your French, Lent and slowness kind of go together. So back to the pancakes. Why would someone eat pancakes on the day before Lent begins? Well, because pancakes are made of sugar, and they're made of milk, sometimes whipped cream if you really want to make them fatty, and flour. And people used to have a great big feast the night before Lent began because they'd start fasting during Lent. So they'd want to use up all of the ingredients they had in their kitchens that were fatty and sweet. So they would make pancakes, and they would have pancakes the day before Lent began. And in some parts of the world, they would have a great big carnival called Mardi Gras, which means, again in French, Mardi, Tuesday, Gras, fat. So Fat Tuesday, so the day you eat a lot of fat. And here's a picture of a Mardi Gras parade in one of, maybe from New Orleans, I think. And it's a great big party time, like, fantastic music, people marching around, dancing in really colorful costumes. They really, really live it up. And then the next day, everything sort of crashes, and they start observing Lent. So here at Lawrence Park, what we're going to do for Lent is a couple of things. I am going to be sending out a daily email, which will also go on social media, called The Symbols of Lent and Easter. I did this over Christmas time, and a lot of people signed up for it and really enjoyed it. And I'm going to be just talking about what Lent means and some of the traditions that go along with Lent, such as pretzels. Pretzels actually have a relationship to Lent. And a lot of people only eat pretzels during Lent, and I'll explain that, and the symbolism of the cross and various other things which happen during Lent. We'll also be having an Ash Wednesday service. And I'm not so sure that Lawrence Park has done this much in the past. But we'll be doing it on Wednesday night at 7:30, and in person as well as online. And that's a time where we're going to actually mark our foreheads with ashes with a cross, so that we can, and you do get to wash it off, so it doesn't last all through Lent, but it's a way of marking the beginning of Lent. And it's a somber, beautiful service, and I think Michelle will be here singing with Carrie, so it's a great way to just sort of enter into Lent, that 40 days of spiritual contemplation. So kids, you might be able to convince your parents to make you pancakes in the next 2 days, but after Tuesday, it's going to be harder. And now we're going to hear a scripture reading which is traditional to be heard just before Lent begins, and it's the Transfiguration of Jesus. And Robert Ong will be reading that for us from his home.
Now about 8 days after these sayings, Jesus took with him Peter and John and James and went up on a mountain to pray. And while he was praying, the appearance of his face changed, and his clothes became dazzling white. Suddenly, they saw two men, Moses and Elijah, talking to him. They appeared in glory and were speaking of his departure, which he was about to accomplish at Jerusalem. Now, Peter and his companions were weighed down with sleep, but since they had stayed awake, they saw his glory and the two men who stood with him. Just as they were leaving him, Peter said to Jesus, "Master, it is good for us to be here. Let us make us three dwellings, one for you, one for Moses, and one for Elijah," not knowing what he said. While he was saying this, a cloud came and overshadowed them, and they were terrified as they entered the cloud. Then from the cloud came a voice that said, "This is my son, my chosen. Listen to him." When the voice had spoken, Jesus was found alone, and they kept silent, and in those days told no one any of the things they had seen.
It's now my pleasure to introduce our guest speaker today, Mr. John Sewell. Mr. Sewell was a member of Toronto City Council from 1969 to 1984 and was the mayor of Toronto from 1979 to 1980. He has engaged in politics in Toronto as a community activist, city councillor, journalist, writer, housing administrator, and social entrepreneur. He's authored a dozen books, including most recently Crisis in Canada's Policing, Why Change is So Hard, and How Can We Get Real Reform in Our Police Forces. He has coordinated the Toronto Police Accountability Coalition for the past 20 years and is a member of Charter City Toronto. He was awarded the Order of Canada in 2005. Given all the questions which have swirled around the best way to fund and use police forces in modern cities, both in terms of their interactions with people of color as well as mental health crises, we thought that here
Thank you very much. I'm very pleased to be here, and I want to start by dealing a bit with the situation in Ukraine, which I find very, very disturbing. And it makes you question the whole idea about the human condition and where we are. And I noticed in the first hymn all these words about our faith not being in vain, and we're fearful lest our faith decline. I mean, all these questions are raised, I think, by the horrors they're seeing in Ukraine. And at the moment, I'm reading the new book by Michael Ignatieff called On Consolation, Finding Solace in Dark Times. And he reviews how a lot of people have dealt with dark periods in their own life or in the world. And his first chapter is about the Psalms, about how powerful it is in dealing with all those questions. And I just wanted to read you just a few sentences from his book. He says, it's the extraordinary capacity of the Psalms to give words to our own doubts, our maddening sense of the inscrutability of the world, the absence of justice, the cruelty of fate, and our longing for a world where our experience finds validation and meaning. The very fact that they have been saved across thousands of years, recited, copied out, rescued from the flames, affirms that we are not alone in our search to give meaning to the world and to our existence. But we do need faith in human beings and the chain of meanings that we have inherited. And that's the lesson of the Psalms. I found it's a very helpful book at these times, On Consolation by Michael Ignatieff. So just wanted to say that. And now it's sort of more mundane, but let's talk about policing in Canada and in Toronto. And the first slide, next slide, please. But the first question I want to deal with is the whole thing about misunderstanding what police do. I think we have a real misunderstanding. We think that police deal with crime and criminal activity. That's their major activity. Probably not the case. In fact, very little of their activities deals with crime, and certainly not very much with violence. And I just wanted to get into some of the data which makes this case. First point I wanted to make was about crime in Canada, and I have a lovely chart. One of the fascinating things is what has happened to crime in Canada. It has gone down in a very, very significant way. And as you can see, crime in Canada was very high about 20 years ago. And it's gone down considerably since that time. The bottom line, the green line, is violent crime. And as you can see, it's very, very small, and it's not changing very much. It's changing marginally, but not very much. But crime generally has significantly decreased in Canada in the last 20 years. Next slide. Statistic Canada has something they call the Crime Severity Index. And what they try and do is measure crime that people are really worried about, not the minor little stuff, but the more serious questions of breaking and enterings and violence and so forth. And you can see what's happened to the Crime Severity Index. The top line, in terms of adults, 20 years ago, it was 105 severe crimes for every 100,000 people in Canada. And in 2018, it had gone down to 75. So a drop of about 25% in serious crimes. And in terms of youth, it's dropped 50%, from 105 down to 55. So this idea that crime is rampant in Canada, it's simply not true. It's literally decreasing. As to why that's the case, well, people have a number of ideas. But in fact, I won't go into them. That's a big, long discussion. But if we can look at that chart one more time, what they do there is that they look at the crime severity index in various kinds of cities. And you can see the highest rate of crime is in Regina, and it goes down and down. And the lowest rate of crime of any large city in Canada is in fact in Toronto. Toronto, the crime rate in Toronto is 53 persons per 100,000. So it's very low. There's only one city in Canada that has a lower crime rate, and that's Quebec City. So we're doing pretty well as a city in terms of crime. The chart on the right looks at the number of police per 100,000 population. And one of the fascinating things is that the number of police per capita bears very little relationship to the amount of crime. So in Toronto, we've got 167 officers per 100,000 population. But in cities that have more officers don't have less crime. Look at Thunder Bay as an example. It's been in the news a lot recently. They've got 190 officers per 100,000, but they've got a lot more crime than Toronto does. So those things don't relate particularly well. And the idea that if we only had more police officers, we'd have less crime doesn't seem to actually be true. And that's the case generally across the country. Next slide. And here's a slide that tells you a bit about what police officers do. There's almost 70,000 police officers in Canada. The number of people who are charged with a crime in Canada every year are about 700,000, which means that each officer in Canada is responsible for charging about 10 people a year, less than one a month. So this notion that the police are out there arresting a lot of people, it's simply not true. They would arrest about one person a month. In Toronto, it's much, much lower than that. If you look at the figures there, Toronto, there's about 27,000 people charged per year in Toronto with a crime. It's 4,800 officers. So in fact, in Toronto, a police officer is going to expect to charge someone with a crime about once every 2 months. And of those arrests, only one is a crime of violence. It could be serious violence, like a murder or a sexual assault, but it could be something minor, like a bar fight. So I think we have to sort of be clear about our understanding that, in fact, at the end of the day, police play some role in dealing with crime, but it's not very much of their activity. They seem to be spending a lot of their time doing other things. And this idea that they're the thin blue line protecting us from crime, it's probably not true. That's a misconception on our part. It's a misunderstanding of how the police work. I want to deal with one other aspect of police activity, which is police patrol work. And the next slide, please. We've often heard that the more that police are visible in society, the less crime will happen and people will feel more secure. And they did a very famous study in Kansas City in the 1970s. And they took three patrol areas, and they looked at each one in advance of the study. And in one, they decided they would continue normal patrols, such as having a car drive around once every hour. And the second one, they decided that they were going to double the amount of patrols, and the car would drive around once every 30 minutes. And in the third area, they decided they would forget about patrols altogether and only respond to calls for service. The fascinating things about this study, and it's a very famous study, is that they found that, in fact, there was no difference in crime rates in any of the three areas. So patrols didn't seem to have any impact in terms of the amount of crime that was happening. But more importantly, there was no difference in public perceptions of safety. People didn't feel safer when there were more police officers around. They didn't feel less safe when there were fewer police officers around. So it's put that was a real challenge to police. And they began to think of all sorts of new ways of trying to encourage police officers, such as the broken windows theory and so forth. But unfortunately, they've never stopped doing patrols. And so in Toronto and in most other police forces in Canada, about 2/3 of the officers are spent in patrol. As somebody said, it's driving around, wasting human energy and fossil fuel energy, but it doesn't seem to accomplish very much. And in spite of this study, which I say everybody agrees with in terms of its conclusion, we haven't been able to get police to rethink this idea of patrol. We have gotten fire departments to rethink it. Fire departments at the beginning of the 20th century used to drive around looking for fires. And then they said, that's a stupid idea. And in fact, now they just respond to calls. And you think, wouldn't it be interesting if we could get the police to actually move in that direction? I think we'd probably be saving a lot of time and a lot of energy, and we'd be getting around an awful lot of boredom that police officers have. I want to talk about police oversight. I'm going to deal with two issues about that, and then I'd like to get into some of the ways that we could rethink policing in Toronto. So on the next slide, I talk about the Toronto Police Services Board. Toronto's Police Service Board is responsible for managing the police. It consists of 7 members, 3 members of council, the mayor, Mayor Tory, and councillors Nunziata and Ford. City Council has 1 citizen appointee, who's Jim Hart, and he's been appointed the chair of the police board. His interest in policing before he was appointed was minimal, nil. He was a senior manager in the Parks Department. But I guess they thought, oh, he's the guy to chair it. And then, of course, there are 3 provincial appointees. This body, the Police Services Board, meets publicly every month. It's meeting, as an example, tomorrow morning. But it turns out to be entirely toothless. It never seems to make any serious change about policing. It listens to the public, but in fact, it says, thank you very much. We're just continuing on the way we are. And whatever it is the police want to do, they do. And I wanted to give you one example of the strip search policy. As you know, police strip search people that they arrest in various times and occasions. It's a matter of great court challenges, and there was one court challenge in 2001. The Supreme Court of Canada considered a strip search that was done by the Toronto Police Force, and it concluded that strip searches are demeaning and degrading, and they're humiliating, and the police should only do them rarely. And the Supreme Court came out with that decision, and it came back to the police board, and the police board said, thank you very much. We're just continuing on as we are now. Our group, the Toronto Police Accountability Coalition, has gone to the police board every year since that to say, you've got to reduce the number of searches, strip searches that you do on people. And even though we started doing that right after the Supreme Court decision, the number of strip searches increased until, under Chief Bill Blair, 40% of all the people who were arrested were strip searched. 40%, even though it's only about 10% of the people who are arrested have anything to do with drugs or violence of any kind. And then in 2018, the Ontario government's police watchdog, the Ontario Office of the Independent Police Review Director, did a study comparing the number of strip searches that were done in Toronto with those done by other large police forces. such as the OPP or the Ottawa Police or the Kingston Police or London Police. And they found that while Toronto strip searched 40% of the people arrested, the other police forces on average strip searched 1% of the people arrested. So Toronto was strip searching 40 times more people than the other police forces in Ontario. And the police board got that report and said, thank you very much. We're just continuing on as we are now. It was only after the murder of George Floyd in May of 2020 that the police board, under great pressure, particularly from Black Lives Matter, said, oh, by the way, we're going to change our strip search policy. And they did. And they adopted what the Supreme Court of Canada had recommended in 2001. It took them 19 years before they made that change. So when I say that the police board is toothless, that's one really useful example. It's very, very discouraging. And a second example is in regard to carding. Carding is a process where police officers stop anybody they want. They're asked their names. They say, what do you got in your pockets? What have you got in your knapsack? Where are you going? Why are you here? Who are your friends? And they would write all that information down and file it away. And so for a lot of people who are particularly youth, particularly Black youth, who'd never been charged with any crime, the police had a record of them. And as an example, if, as various studies have shown, if those youth then applied to be a police officer, they were always pushed away and said, no, you can't do it because we'd have carding information on you. And the first study about carding in Canada was done in Kingston in 2004. And it said that carding discriminates against people who are Black and people who are of color. And it came up, that study came about because of some horrific event with 2 young Black kids in Kingston. And the police chief apologized. The police association, the police board said, sorry, we just don't believe that data. We don't discriminate against anybody. Everybody knew they did. In Toronto, the Toronto Star decided it would try and get the evidence about what was happening with carding in Toronto. And so it applied to the police board to get that data, and the police board said no. And as you can, under the Freedom of Information Act, you can then ask for someone to review that data and your request by an arbitrator. The arbitrator said, yes, the police should release that data to the Toronto Star so it can do a study about who is stopped in policing. The police board then appealed that decision. No, we don't want to give that data. And the appeal court, Superior Court of Justice in Ontario, said, no, this data should be revealed. That's what the Freedom of Information Act is about. The police board again appealed to the Court of Appeal. And the Court of Appeal then released a decision saying, look, this is what the Freedom of Information Act is all about. It must be released. So it took the Toronto Star 2.5 years to actually get that data because the police board didn't want to release it. And of course, once it was released, it was perfectly clear that in fact, carding discriminated against kids. The police board still said, yeah, we're doing nothing. And it wasn't until 2016 that the Ontario government intervened and said, we're going to stop carding in Ontario, period. But the police board, they could have done that. They could have done that in 2010, and they didn't. So the police board is really, really toothless. And sadly, it doesn't seem to come to grips with the issues that it's presented to us. It's very, very sad. We need a police board that's going to be stronger. And I'll get to that a bit later. And the second body that's very influential in regard to policing is the Toronto Police Association. Toronto Police Association represents the existing and former officers. And it's like a union. It bargains for collective agreements. It supports, provides support for legal representation and so forth, all of which is a very good thing. It lobbies very strongly for police. So if somebody wants to make some change in policing, it will often oppose it extremely strongly. That happens across the country. After the death of George Floyd, when people talk about defunding police, and there was some thought of reducing budgets for police in various cities across Canada, police associations in all those cities really opposed it very, very strongly, and many police boards backed down, and as did city councils. But the other thing the police association does is it attacks anyone who criticizes police. It attacks them very strongly. When I was mayor, the police had killed a man called Albert Johnson, a Black man who had some mental health issues. And one day there he was in the laneway behind his house, and he was yelling. Somebody phoned the police officers. The police came. They chased him into his house. They broke down his door. They shot him to death in front of his daughter. And as the mayor, I spoke out and I said, this is wrong. This should not be happening. We've got to change the way police are dealing with people. Police association went really after me. Sewell's a cop hater, they said. They literally wouldn't deal with the issue. They decided to attack me, and they attacked me very strongly. So when the election, my re-election came up in the end of 1980, they made it very, very clear nobody should be voting for Sewell. And I think they had a big impact on that election. I lost that election to Art Eggleton by literally a vote a poll. He got 88,000 votes. I got 86,000 votes. And I think it's because the police association really went after me. But it's not just me. They went after Susan Eng when she was the chair of the Police Services Board, and Alan Heisey when he was the chair. They put a private detective onto Judy Scrow, who, when she was a member of the police board, and they made it clear that she was being followed all the time. She's now a member of parliament, and on and on and on. And they've done it in other places as well. So they're very, I'd call them a malign force when it comes to policing. And it means that many, many politicians are not willing to speak out about policing. On that whole issue of strip searches, as an example, we could never get a single member of council in all those 17 or 18 years to come with us to the police board to say they should reduce the number of strip searches. So the police association is a very, very strong body, and not in a good cause in my mind. I love the idea that they can represent their members, but the pressure they put on people who talk about policing is unfortunate. So let me get on to some of the changes that I think could be made to the police that are pretty straightforward, and I hope that in fact they make sense to you. The first is something called pre-charge screening. Pre-charge screening is where the Crown lays charges, not the police. We've got experience about this in Canada. In fact, we have pre-charge screening in Quebec and British Columbia and New Brunswick. And what we find is that it substantially reduces the number of charges. In Ontario, for instance, about 50% of the charges laid by the police are withdrawn or rejected by the courts. In Quebec, where they have pre-charge screening, it's 10%. And in Toronto, the data is quite overwhelming. More than 2/3 of the charges laid by the police are withdrawn or dismissed by the courts. That's an amazing expense for the justice system, for the police, and of course for those poor individuals who are wrongly charged. And of course, one of the things we know is that if you happen to be Black or a person of color, the chance of you being charged by the police are much more significant, 4 or 5 times greater than if you're white. So if we put pre-charge screening in place in Ontario or Toronto, what we'd find is a much more efficient system for charging people that's much fairer to people. And if we included a racial lens to it, so that we're making it very clear that we're not being discriminatory against people who are Black or Indigenous or of color, we can make a very substantial change. So in terms of why we add a racial or a sexual lens, as it's clear in terms of carding, you're more likely to be stopped if you're Black than you're white, although we've generally gotten rid of carding in Ontario. And there is a thing called discretionary charges, where the police have an option. Well, they can turn a blind eye, or they can give a warning, or they can lay a charge. If you're Black or Indigenous, your chances of facing a discriminatory charge is at least 5 times more. This is according to the data of the Ontario Human Rights Commission. You probably want to add a sexual lens as well. The amount of sexism in policing is very, very disturbing. You may remember the series that the Globe and Mail published 4 or 5 years ago called Unfounded, where they looked at what happened when women would complain about sexual assaults. And it was found that often the police would say, oh yeah, we just don't believe you. We just don't believe you. And some police forces have actually changed their policies considerably on that now. So in fact, they actually do believe women. But everybody considered that that was just very straightforward sexist. But then if you look at the Murdered and Missing Women Commission, particularly what happened out in the West Coast, particularly in British Columbia, it's a heartrending report. If you haven't seen it, you might look at it. It is absolutely heartrending, the way that the police literally didn't care about what had happened to all these women. Very, very frightening. It's very sexist. And then, of course, there's the report Broken Dreams, Broken Lives. It was done by Mr. Justice Bastarache on women in the RCMP. Mr. Justice Bastarache was formerly the Supreme Court of Canada. And again, it's a very disturbing report about how police deal with women in the police force. And most police forces in Canada are facing lawsuits by female officers because of the way they've been discriminated against. So adding a sexual lens to pre-charge screening, as well as a racial lens, in fact, will probably be very, very useful about beginning to reform police. And the point I want to make about pre-charge screening is it's already being done in 3 other provinces. It works really, really well. We should be doing it here in Ontario. The police board in Toronto should be asking the provincial government to give it the legislation to do so. Our group has asked the police board to do it, and they've just had no interest whatsoever. It's a change that should be made and could be made. Second change I want to get into is the idea of ending suspension with pay. I'm sure you've heard about this idea, that in fact, if you're a police officer and you're charged with a criminal offense or code of conduct offense, you get suspended, but you must be fully paid. That's the legislation in Ontario. The only way you can stop being paid if you're an officer is if you're put in prison. Even if you've been convicted of an offense and you're under appeal, you still must be paid. It's really quite extraordinary. One of the reasons that, in fact, the police can appeal these convictions for such a long time is because they have the support of the Police Association, who provides them with lawyers and so forth. But the cost of suspension with pay in Toronto is somewhere between $12 and $15 million a year. It's a lot of money, and it seems crazy. Any other job, if you do something wrong, you get suspended and you aren't paid. You can challenge that suspension, but in fact, it's sort of, in my opinion, entirely fair. If you do something wrong, sorry, you get dismissed. You aren't paid. In Alberta, the chief is allowed to suspend an officer without pay. Been doing it for 5 years, works perfectly well. So why can't we do that here in Ontario? Why don't we get the Toronto Police Board to be really pressuring the provincial government to make that change? 12 to 15 million bucks, a lot of money. We could spend that in really, really useful ways. So that's a second change I'd like to see. Third, we have a rule in Toronto that says that after dark, you have to have 2 officers in a car. Very few police forces in North America have that kind of a rule. It was brought in because somebody said, oh, it's not safe for officers to be out after dark alone. But in fact, the data on that is simply not available. In Toronto, in the first 4 months of last year, Toronto received 300,000 calls for service. Only 10,000 of them involved some threat of violence. 97% of them didn't involve violence. You don't need 2 officers in the car for those calls. The amount of money you'd save because you don't have to hire as many officers would be quite considerable. I suggest $30 to $50 million here. Maybe people have other suggestions as what that is. But you'd just be removing that second officer in most police cars. Obviously, if you have a call where there is some violence, something very worrisome occurring, you put 2 officers in the car and send them out. But this would be, again, something that would be very easy to end. The Toronto Police Board has the power to end that policy, and it has decided not to do so. I think the Police Association thinks they don't want it ended because it would mean they'd have fewer members. You wouldn't need as many police officers. So it's like feather bedding. So that's another change that, again, would be very straightforward. As I say, it's being done by lots of other police forces in Canada and in North America, where they only have 1 officer in a car for most calls. We could do it here as well. Thank you. The next change I'd like to see is disarming the police. As we know, each officer has a gun, a conducted energy weapon, a taser often they call it, a baton, and body armor. But as I've just pointed out, few calls involve violence. There's absolutely no reason why police have to have all this kind of dangerous equipment, which often is used for bad purposes. People are killed by it when it shouldn't be. And in fact, the number of times a gun is used by the Toronto Police each year, it's less than 20 times for all the officers in Toronto. They publish that data every year. And, they often say, well, half the time it was used, it was to kill an animal who was suffering. And 3 or 4 times it was fired in mistake. The point is that literally they don't use these guns very often, and there's no reason why police officers should have them. And the point is there's lots of other police forces in the world where police are not armed. The Metropolitan Police Force in London is the best example. And they deal with lots of calls involving violence. And in fact, they seem to do quite well with them. So I would argue that, in fact, we should be disarming the police, and the only gun should be available to the emergency task force of people who are really trained in how to use them and how not to use them. And the point is that, they're often used. I got the data at the bottom of the screen there. For that 16-year period in Ontario, almost 150 people were killed, shot to death by police in Ontario. That's a change, again, that other police forces have made. We could be making it. We could be trying some experiments with it if we wanted. But we should be disarming the police. Just a couple of other changes. One is detasking or defunding police. You've heard a lot about this. People have talked about defunding police. And really what this is about is taking tasks away from the police that could be better done by somebody else. So police respond to mental distress calls. In Toronto, about 30,000 of them a year, where there's somebody in mental distress and the police officer goes. And of course, the police are, they are trained to command and control, get down, lie down, put your hands in the air, that sort of thing. You say those things to someone who's in a mental crisis, and that just drives the person around the bend. And then the police officer doesn't know what to do, pulls out a gun, shoots the person or tasers them or whatever. Used to be that in Toronto, maybe 2 or 3 people a year were killed in that position. Now, Toronto seems to have reduced it a bit, but other police forces continue to do it. I mean, while we were in that great big melee up in Ottawa last week, there's the Calgary police. What do? They shot to death a man who was mentally ill on the sidewalks in Calgary. So it's happening all the time. Be better to have somebody else to respond to those calls. In Toronto, we have something called the Gerstein Center that in fact tries to do that right now. And if we started to strengthen those community agencies so that they who know how to deal with people in mental distress could be making those calls on an emergency basis, it would be much safer for those people who are in mental distress, and they'd get better care. The same is probably true for those involved in drug overdoses. No need to send police out to those. No need to send out to police out to those who are homeless or youth. And I think what's happened is that we've ended up using the police as the default service for these problems, which have nothing to do with policing. And be better if, in fact, we got rid of them and turned them over to community agencies. We'd save a lot of money because, of course, police are paid a lot. The average salary with benefits for a police officer in Toronto is about $130,000 a year. Boy, if a social worker could get half that amount, they'd be pretty happy with that. So we'd save money and we'd get better service. So that's what defunding, or as I prefer to call it, detasking police is all about. Toronto City Council has asked that we do that in regard to mental distress calls. In fact, what has happened is that the police in Toronto have increased funding to deal with mental distress calls. So it's gone exactly the wrong way. We should be trying to reduce that money, put it over to community agencies, let them deal with it. And the last thing I wanted to, or there are 2 other things I want. Police culture. Police culture is very worrisome. It's racist, it's sexist, and it's violent. And the data on that just goes on and on. I've dealt a bit with the racist and the sexist stuff, the violent stuff. I won't deal with it, but it is there. And we've got to start to break it. And I think the way we do it is the way we hire police officers. At the moment we hire police officers, they all start at the bottom and work up, and they work up through the police force. And if they're good police officers, they get appointed to more and more senior positions and so forth. If they bought into the culture, they get appointed. And imagine if you wanted to work in a hospital as a doctor, that you started at the bottom as an orderly. And then you got up to be an orderly supervisor, and then you got to be a nurse's assistant, and then a nurse, and then finally you get appointed to be a doctor. That would be craziness. That's what we do in policing. I don't think we do it in any other organization I can think of, maybe the military, but in any other public or private organization, what they do is they have a job posted saying, here's the person we want, here are the skills we want, and then they interview people and hire them. We should be doing that in policing. And in that way, in fact, we can get really good candidates who don't have a lot of police culture put right into them from the day they go into police college to move forward. We can also do it by appointing senior managers who come from outside policing. As we know, when you're trying to find a new manager in a large company of some sort, you don't just look at managers in companies like yours. You actually look for people who are good managers who can come in and make change in your company. We should be doing that in policing rather than pointing everybody from below. Just as in Toronto, if you're going to be the police chief, you have had to work for Toronto for virtually the whole of your career. We should be doing people from outside. Edmonton is in fact now done that. They have 2 deputy chiefs who were appointed with no police experience at all. So they're people who can begin to break police culture. We should be making that change. And the last change I want to talk about is pretty simple: how police spend their time. We don't have good information about literally how they spend their time. We have aggregate information from the Statistics Canada. And according to that data across the country, police respond to about 2 calls per shift. Not a lot. Each call might take what? 40 minutes, 30 minutes, an hour? So what are they doing the rest of the time? The last study we had done on this was done in the 1970s in the Peel region. And in fact, it was so astounding to police that nobody's agreed to do that study since then. It's a very, very strong study showing that in fact, most of the time, nobody's doing much of anything. We need a study about that. So there are 7 changes about what we might do. And let me just conclude by saying that making change in policing's not easy, given all the factors I've mentioned. But we need police board members who are going to be appointed to actually make change. We have to have members who understand what policing is about, have some experience about some of the things that are happening in policing, and are willing to go and represent the public to make those changes. We need city council members who are willing to address police issues rather than to say, well, can't get involved in those. Now it's going to be difficult for members of council because they're going to be attacked by police associations. But if we have members of the public coming forward saying, come on, we got to make some change, then in fact, I think we can probably do it. And lastly, we need citizens and groups ready to appear before the police board. We've got this example coming up tomorrow. Tomorrow, the Toronto Police Board is going to be dealing with a new policy about artificial intelligence. You may have heard that artificial intelligence in regard to policing is very, very discriminatory. It really does attack people who are Black and Indigenous, all those artificial intelligence programs. And just to give you the example, the police service put out a draft policy in November and asked members of the public to comment on it. 40 members of the public, including our group and a number of other groups, responded and said, this policy is not good enough. It's got to be changed. And here are the changes that should be made to it. But tomorrow at the police board, staff is reporting that they want to go ahead with the November policy without really any serious changes. In spite of the fact that all 40 members of the public that responded said this policy is not good enough. And my worry is that the police board is just going to say, sorry, we're going to agree with staff. We don't care what the public had to say. We need a lot of citizens to say, no, you've got to actually start listening to the public. So there are the 3 things about how we can make change. It's not going to be easy, but it's something we should do. I've gone on for much longer than I should have, but let me stop there. Thank you very much.
Be
I'd like to thank John Sewell for speaking today. That was most informative. Thank you very much, John. Today's prayer is a little different than usual. Because of what's happening in Ukraine, I thought that instead of the standard minister's prayer, I would simply read you a poem written by the poet who is considered the Ukraine in the 21st century, their most celebrated poet. His name is Serhiy Zhadan, and he grew up in the eastern portion of Ukraine. He wrote this poem, Take Only What Is Important, in 2015, just a few months after the invasion of Crimea by the Russians. He continues to be a correspondent and writer. You can read his dispatches in the New Yorker and other publications, and he's active right now. So instead of a standard prayer, I'm just going to read this poem by him. And he's part of a group of poets who have been writing since the invasion of Crimea, who employs surrealist imagery in their poetry. And like the Psalms, they cry out for justice. And you'll hear there's a trajectory to this poem, not because he's given up hope, but because he needs us all to hear the depth of pain which is being created in Ukraine. Take only what is important. Take the letters. Take only what you can carry. Take the icons and the embroidery. Take the silver. Take the wooden crucifix and the golden replicas. Take some bread, the vegetables from the garden, then leave. We will never return again. We will never see our city again. Take the letters, all of them, every last piece of bad news. We will never see our corner store again. We will never drink from that dry well again. We will never see familiar faces again. We are refugees. We'll run all night. We will run past fields of sunflowers. We will run from dogs, rest with cows. We'll scoop up water with our bare hands, sit waiting in camps, annoying the dragons of war. You will not return, and friends will never come back. There will be no smoky kitchens, no usual jobs. There will be no dreamy lights in sleepy towns, no green valleys, no suburban wastelands. The sun will be a smudge on the window of a cheap train, rushing past cholera pits covered with lime. There will be blood on your heels, tired guards on borderlands covered with snow. A postman with empty bags shot down. A priest with a hapless smile hung by his ribs. The quiet of a cemetery, the noise of a command post, and unedited lists of the dead. So long, there won't be time to check them for your own name. I'd just like to talk you through the announcements. There's a lot of things happening in the next week or two, so I'll try to be brief because I know we're running long today. We have obviously returned to church. The fall rules still apply. Masks, double vaccination, please pre-register. Our maximum capacity is 50 for congregants, so we have lots of room for congregants, so if you do want to come, you're more than welcome to do so. And we have N95 masks for everyone. And you can even take them home. It's not often you get swag at church, but we've got it. Our schedule this week is a little bit different than usual. Because we're doing an Ash Wednesday service on Wednesday, there won't be a prayer service on Wednesday, and there also won't be a hymn sing on Thursday, and that's just because we're doing a funeral at 11 o'clock that morning, so there's only so much our staff can do in a particular week. There is Monday meditation and coffee talk with Allison, however, on Monday and Tuesday. The Ash Wednesday service will start at 7:30 p.m. You're welcome to come in person, and Michelle and Carrie will be here as our musicians. Reverend Roberta Howie and myself will be running the service. And if you're doing it at home, please have a candle on standby to light and then extinguish, because you're going to use the soot from the candle to mark your forehead. I'll be doing a daily email and posting on social media about Lent, as I mentioned during children's time. If you would like to sign up for that, all you have to do is send me an email at stephen@lawrenceparkchurch.ca, and they'll start on Tuesday. And I promise it'll be interesting. If you don't really get Lent, this is a good way to get Lent and to learn more about it. On Thursday, Elizabeth Elliott's funeral will be held here at 11 o'clock in the morning. Because of capacity limits, it's by invitation only. So unless you're specifically invited, please just join us at home. On March 6th, which is next Sunday, we'll be having, after the service, the Finance Annual General Meeting. The financial reports will be emailed to you this week so that you can peruse them that way. You're also welcome to come to the meeting after church next week, and there'll be some paper copies, but it'd be better to look at your electronic ones. This is the meeting where we talk about the budget for next year. I will be I'll be helping with a Lenten anti-racism study, which will be happening online. It's a reading about anti-racism, often video readings, which are provided every single day if you want to sign up. And I'll be joining a number of ministers to help Reverend Bridget Maya Douglas do the sessions on Monday nights. So there'll be more information in the Monday update tomorrow. But if you'd like to sort of really spend some time reflecting about the racism you may have inherited, this would be a great way to do that. And you can join me on Monday nights, and I'll be one of the people running the breakout rooms. And I'm going to skip the next one. Let's just skip that and get straight to Joyce. And Joyce is going to give us a green minute.
Good morning, everyone. Do you know what happens to our organic waste after we put our green bins out at the curb? Here in Toronto, our green bin waste goes to one of two processing facilities here in the city. When it arrives there, the first step is to remove any plastic bags and other contaminant materials. This is done either using a press or using what's known as a hydropulper, which adds water to be able to sift out the contaminants. Then the remaining organic waste goes to an anaerobic digester, where microorganisms break down your green bin scraps, producing biogas and digester solids. And these digester solids are then turned into compost. The compost is used in Toronto parks and gardens and is given out for free on community environment days. And if I could have the slide, please. Now, the biogas at the Dufferin facility is currently being collected, and the city is working with Enbridge Gas to create renewable natural gas that will be blended with standard natural gas, making a low-carbon fuel to power Toronto city vehicles and to heat city buildings. The gas is currently being stored as production of the renewable natural gas is being stabilized, and the city is actually starting to put that in production this year. And then Toronto is also planning to upgrade its biogas and landfill gas collection at 3 other city facilities and landfills. And the gas collected at all 4 of these facilities together have the potential to produce enough gas for all of the city's needs. The second of these facilities is due to come online next year in 2023. So keep on filling up your green bins, and you'll be helping to power the collection trucks that take away your organic waste. Thanks very much.
Thank you, Joyce. Just 2 more things. If you would like to make a donation to our church, we're always happy to receive donations, and you can just use your electronic banking to send money to this particular email address, or if you'd like to sign up for monthly deductions, you can do it through PAR and just send an email to Michael Larkin. And if you'd like to contact me, I'm always happy to talk to people in person as well as online, so just drop me a line and we'll set up a time. And now our choir is going to sing a very appropriate closing hymn, I'm Gonna Live So God Can Use Me.
I'm gonna live so God can use me anywhere, Lord, anytime. I'm gonna live so God can use me anywhere, Lord, anytime. I'm gonna work so God can use me anywhere, Lord, anytime. I'm gonna work so God can use me anywhere, Lord, anytime. I'm gonna pray so God can use me anywhere, Lord, anytime. I'm gonna pray so God can use me anywhere, Lord, anytime. I'm gonna sing so God can use me anywhere, Lord, anytime. I'm gonna sing so God can use me anywhere, Lord, anytime.
So friends, go now into this world knowing that you are blessed. You are blessed with the wish of peace, the wish of a peace that will go deep down into your spirit, into your soul, so that when you go out to be that person that God is going to use, you will be bringing that blessing of peace to everyone you meet. Whether it's with a smile, a simple opening of a door, or writing a letter to a politician, or showing up at a meeting, there's so many ways in which that peace can be shared. And know that you have been blessed with that Spirit, here and on all days by God. May the love of God and the grace of our Lord Jesus Christ and the abiding presence of the Holy Spirit be with you now and always. Amen.